I've spent the entire week rewatching Andrew Barry's press conference, studying not just what he said, but how he said it. Which questions he leaned into with genuine enthusiasm. Which ones he sidestepped with almost surgical precision. The more I analyze it, the more convinced I become that something significant happened in that room, something that most people completely missed. Here's what I realized. The biggest commitment an NFL executive can make doesn't come through bold headlines or attention-grabbing sound bites. It comes through the architecture underneath the words, the structure of each response, the arrangement of language itself, and once you learn to read that architecture, there's no way to misinterpret what Barry communicated this week. The Cleveland Browns starting quarterback is Shedeur Sanders. That decision isn't pending. It's already made. The official announcement hasn't come yet, and the depth chart designation is still technically open, but the actual decision, the one made in film rooms and organizational strategy sessions over months, that's been finalized. Barry just informed everyone who was actually listening. Most people consume press conferences completely backwards, and what you're about to discover will change how you interpret every front office statement moving forward. Most people consume press conferences completely backwards. They focus on the surface layer, the specific claims, the diplomatic warmth, the carefully crafted optimism. That's the headline layer. It's specifically designed to be quoted without causing any problems. It's the safe zone where executives can make statements that sound decisive without technically committing to anything concrete enough to create future complications. But underneath that surface sits the real information, hidden in plain sight for anyone willing to look deeper. It's in which player receives forward-looking language, which player gets courteous management language, which questions get genuine traction versus polite deflection. The actual story lives in those structural decisions. Understanding this requires recognizing that front office executives operate within constraints that most fans never consider. They can't always say what they mean directly because of salary cap implications, player morale, media narratives, and legal considerations. A poorly chosen word can create contract complications. A misinterpreted statement can damage locker room dynamics. An overly enthusiastic endorsement can damage a player's confidence if circumstances change. So instead, they developed a sophisticated system of communication, one that speaks clearly to those who understand the language while maintaining plausible deniability for those who don't. At Barry's level, front office executives dedicate their entire careers to mastering this architecture. Every word is chosen with intention. Every grammatical choice carries weight. The message isn't in individual sentences, it's in the pattern those choices create together. This is something that separates elite front office operators from good ones. It's the difference between executives who can navigate complicated situations and those who create unnecessary problems through imprecise communication. Barry is among the elite. He understands that language can be a tool for both transparency and protection simultaneously. Consider how this works in practice. When an executive discusses a player's development, they have multiple linguistic options. They can use prospect language. We're excited about his potential and the trajectory we're seeing. They can use competitive language. He's competing hard and showing good things. They can use investment language. We're focused on his development and growth. Or they can use command language. We anticipate him having more control over the offense. Each of these statements sounds positive on the surface. Each could be quoted in a headline without controversy. But to someone fluent in front office communication, each statement signals something completely different about organizational commitment. Prospect language suggests a player is being evaluated. Competitive language suggests a player is among several options. Investment language suggests organizational resources are being deployed. Command language suggests a decision has already been made and the system is being built around that player. The difference between we're excited about his potential and we anticipate him having more control is the difference between we're still evaluating and we've decided. One statement leaves options open, the other closes them. This linguistic architecture serves a practical purpose beyond just communication. It allows organizations to make decisions without creating unnecessary turbulence. A coach doesn't want his quarterback to hear through the media that he's in a competition. A veteran player doesn't want to read headlines suggesting his time is ending. The organization needs to move forward while respecting the people involved. Strategic language allows this. It communicates clearly to stakeholders while maintaining the external narrative of openness and fairness. The brilliance of Barry's approach is that he never violated the surface narrative. He didn't say, "Shedeur is our guy and Watson is leaving." He didn't declare, "We've moved on from the Watson era." He didn't make any statement that could be quoted as definitive or controversial. Yet to anyone understanding the architecture of his language, every structural choice pointed in one direction. Every pattern of word selection reinforced the same message. He was simultaneously honest with insiders and careful with the public. That's executive mastery. Understanding this architecture is crucial because it determines how you interpret everything that comes from front offices. When you hear a general manager discuss a player's continued development, that's different from discussing their expanded role. When you hear about a player competing for opportunities, that's different from command of the offense. When you hear acknowledgement of a player's background versus enthusiastic discussion of their future, those aren't comparable statements of equal commitment. The press conference isn't just about communication, it's about signal sending. It's about ensuring that scouts, coaches, coordinators, and players all understand the organizational direction without creating a public controversy that complicates the transition. Someone like Todd Monken watches that press conference and understands what offensive installation priorities need to be. Coaching staff understands where reps should be distributed. Scouts understand what this means for roster construction. Players understand their role moving forward. The entire organization reads the same message in different ways, but the message is consistent. This is what separates professional organizations from chaotic ones. It's not about making bold statements or generating headlines. It's about precision in communication that serves organizational objectives while maintaining professional dignity for all involved. It's about understanding that how you say something matters as much as what you say. It's about recognizing that the real decisions happen in film rooms and strategy sessions, and the press conference is simply the moment when those decisions become visible to those paying attention. But most people aren't paying attention. Most people listen for headlines. Most people miss the architecture. And that's exactly how Barry prefers it. When a reporter asked Barry about Shedeur's trajectory heading into this season, something happened that stopped me cold. Barry didn't respond with the kind of ambiguous organizational encouragement that front offices give to players they're genuinely uncertain about. His response wasn't hedged. It wasn't cautious. It was specific, detailed. It revealed a clear organizational investment. This is where you start to see the real decision-making infrastructure at work. Barry didn't give a generic answer about a young quarterback's development. He gave a masterclass in how to communicate organizational commitment while maintaining the technical openness of a competition. He discussed ways Shedeur was making better decisions. This is significant because decision-making is the foundation of quarterback evaluation. You can have arm talent, mobility, and physical tools, but if your decision-making is inconsistent, you're not ready. Barry highlighting this suggests extensive film study has been done. Real evaluation has occurred. Concrete improvements have been observed. He wasn't speculating about potential, he was documenting actual progress. That distinction matters enormously. When a general manager discusses specific improvements a young player has made, he's documenting evidence that supports a particular decision. He talked about pocket management evolving in noticeable ways. This is even more telling. Pocket management is about a quarterback's ability to move within structure, recognize when plays are breaking down, and extend plays through his legs or awareness. It's a skill that separates elite young quarterbacks from good ones. It's something that typically takes multiple years to develop because it requires both mental processing and physical instinctiveness. For Barry to highlight this specific improvement suggests Shedeur has made developmental leaps that most second-year quarterbacks don't achieve. More importantly, it suggests the organization has been tracking this development closely and sees trajectory that justifies investment. He mentioned the increasing consistency of ball security with concrete, quantifiable examples. Ball security is fundamental. It's the most basic requirement for a starting quarterback. If you're turning the ball over, nothing else matters. But this wasn't Barry vaguely noting that ball security has improved. He provided specific examples, quantifiable data. He was building a case, not for the public, The public doesn't care about quantifiable ball security improvements. He was building a case for people in the building. He was establishing documented evidence that supports the organizational direction. Every coach, every scout, every decision maker in that organization now has talking points. They have concrete examples. They have data supporting the decision that's been made. He mentioned situational awareness sharpening. This is the chess player's evaluation. Situational awareness is about understanding down and distance, understanding what defense is showing, understanding where help is coming from, understanding the game situation, and how it affects decision-making. A quarterback can have all the physical tools in the world, but without situational awareness, he's making decisions in a vacuum. When Barry highlights this, he's identifying the cognitive component that transforms a talented young player into a legitimate franchise quarterback. He's saying that Shedeur doesn't just have talent, he has the mental framework to deploy that talent effectively. And then he used one particular word that absolutely did not receive the attention it deserved. He said that going into this season, he anticipates Shedeur having more command over the offense. Stop and really consider that word for a moment. Command. That's not prospect language. That's not the cautious, developmental language executives use when they're genuinely assessing a player against open competition. When a front office is truly evaluating multiple quarterbacks fairly, you never hear this phrase. Command of the offense is franchise quarterback language. It's the term you use to describe the player you've already chosen, the one around whom the system is being constructed. The word command carries enormous weight in NFL circles. It doesn't mean managing or running or understanding. It means owning. It means authority. It means the quarterback is the decision maker, and the system functions through his understanding and execution. When you have command of something, you don't need to think about the instructions. You've internalized the system so deeply that you operate with autonomy. That's the distinction Barry was making. He wasn't saying Shedeur would be better at following the offensive coordinator's instructions. He was saying Shedeur would internalize the offense so completely that he would manage it independently. This language is reserved for players whose development you're financing because their identity within the organization has already been decided in the rooms where those decisions actually happen. You don't use command for a player you're still evaluating. You don't use it for a player in a genuine competition. You use it for the quarterback you've already committed to, the one whose growth trajectory justifies organizational investment, the one whose failure would reflect organizational failure because you've already committed so much to their success. Andrew Barry used that word deliberately. He's far too skilled and precise in his professional communication to use language like that without knowing exactly what it signals to anyone paying close attention. Every executive in the league understood what he communicated. Every coach understood. Every scout understood. The message wasn't subtle for people who speak the language. He was saying, we've made our decision. The system is being built around Shedeur Sanders. We're investing in his development as our franchise quarterback. Everything that follows is just the process of making it official. The film doesn't lie. The numbers support it. The organizational investment reflects it. The language confirms it. This is where Cleveland's future is heading. But that wasn't the whole story. Now let's examine what happened when the Watson question came up, because this is where the contrast becomes absolutely unmistakable. A reporter gave Barry an almost gift-wrapped opportunity to recognize Watson's experience as a genuine competitive advantage. The framing was polite, almost deferential. Naturally, a quarterback with years of NFL starting experience and Pro Bowl appearances brings something to the game that a second-year player can't match with skill alone. Think about how perfectly constructed that question was. It was practically inviting Barry to say something positive about Watson. It was offering him an easy path to acknowledge Watson's veteran status without controversy. It was the kind of softball question that allows a general manager to build someone up while staying technically fair to the competition narrative. That's the easy, no one gets hurt version of that response. It would have satisfied Watson. It would have satisfied the media. It would have allowed Barry to say something supportive without creating headlines. A typical general manager would take that path. They would say something like, absolutely, Deshaun's experience is invaluable. He's been in Pro Bowls, he's won games at this level, and that's something you can't teach. That response would be quoted positively. Watson would feel supported. The narrative would be balanced. Barry declined to take it. Instead, he explicitly refused to acknowledge Watson's experience as a true competitive advantage. He reframed it as a general quality that benefits anyone who possesses it, stripping away any suggestion that Watson's Pro Bowl appearances, his years as a starter, or his track record of elite play when healthy actually give him any edge over a second-year quarterback with 7 total NFL starts. Think about what that means. Think about what that communicates. This is a player for whom the organization paid $230 million in fully guaranteed money. A player for whom they traded 3 first-round draft picks to acquire. A player who was supposed to be the franchise quarterback solution. And his own general manager just publicly stated that his Pro Bowl credentials and years of starting experience don't actually give him a legitimate advantage over a second-year player in a quarterback competition. That's not diplomatic. That's not impartial analysis. That's not a general manager trying to keep everyone happy. That's a door being expertly shut with a composed smile and perfectly chosen words. The significance of what Barry didn't acknowledge is enormous. He didn't say Watson's experience matters in the context of this competition. He didn't say Watson's Pro Bowl appearances give him an edge. He didn't say Watson's years as a starter are valuable. He deflated the value of everything that supposedly makes Watson qualified for this job. He essentially said that whatever edge Watson might have expected from his resume, that edge doesn't apply here. In this specific situation, in this specific competition, against this specific second-year player, that's executive-level coldness. That's the moment where a general manager stops protecting an investment and starts signaling an exit. Not immediately, they can't afford that. The cap situation doesn't allow it. The optics don't allow it. But he signaled that the investment is no longer considered valuable. He communicated that whatever Watson was brought in to be, he's no longer going to be that in Cleveland. The gap between how Barry discussed Shedeur and how he discussed Watson isn't subtle. It's not a matter of interpretation. It's not something you need to read between the lines to understand. It's a Grand Canyon. One quarterback received clear, upbeat, forward-thinking language about organizational investment, growth, and development. Specific improvements, documented progress, the language of commitment. The other received courteous acknowledgement of his professional background, a deflation of his supposed competitive advantages, a refusal to grant him status even in a supposed open competition. In a truly open competition, those aren't equal treatments of 2 players fighting for the same job. They're the outward expression of an internal decision that's already been finalized. They're conveyed through the exact architectural choices of an executive who knows the true meaning of every word he says to anyone paying close attention. Barry wasn't being rude to Watson. He wasn't being disrespectful. He was being honest in a way that only people fluent in front office language would understand. Watson now exists in a peculiar position. He's on the roster. He's collecting his paycheck. The organization is stuck with his contract. But his own general manager has publicly refused to defend him as the starting quarterback. He's been publicly passed over in favor of a second-year player with minimal experience. And this didn't happen through dramatic announcement or harsh words. It happened through a general manager's choice to not defend Watson's experience as competitive advantage. That's remarkably cruel in its professionalism. It's not an explosion. It's not a confrontation. It's a quiet repositioning that communicates everything while claiming to communicate nothing specific. Watson will understand what happened in that press conference. His teammates will understand. The coaching staff will understand. The entire league will understand. Everyone except, perhaps, the people who weren't paying attention. And that's exactly the point. Barry ensured that those paying attention, the people who matter, the people in the building, the people making decisions, would understand clearly. And everyone else would think it was just a regular press conference about an open competition. But what happened there was the moment Deshaun Watson's Cleveland Browns chapter officially ended, even though it technically continues. And that financial reality is the third piece of this puzzle. But there's a financial reality that everyone's been avoiding, and it matters enormously for understanding the complete picture. In what is essentially the last year of one of the most disastrously expensive, fully guaranteed contracts in professional football history, Watson's cap hit on Cleveland's Browns books is $44.9 million. That number doesn't just represent money. It represents organizational constraint. It represents a decision that can't be easily undone. It represents the price of a gamble that didn't work out. And understanding this number is crucial to understanding why Barry can afford to publicly diminish Watson while technically keeping him on the roster. The fully guaranteed structure is what makes this situation so painful. Normally, if a team wants to move on from a quarterback, they can release them, eat a dead cap hit, and move forward. It's not ideal, but it's possible. It allows organizations to reset and start fresh. But with Watson, the structure of his contract makes that impossible. The organization can't simply say, "We made a mistake," and move on. They're locked in. They're stuck paying him regardless of whether he plays. They're paying him to sit on the bench. They're paying him to be a backup. They're paying him while investing in his replacement. This is the organizational nightmare that Tom Pelissero, Ian Rappaport, and every other beat reporter has carefully danced around. It's the elephant in the room at every press conference. It's why Watson can't just be released. It's why he can't just be traded without Cleveland eating enormous financial penalties. It's why, even though Barry has clearly decided to move forward with Shedeur Sanders, Watson has to remain on the roster. The cap situation doesn't permit clarity. It requires a strange limbo where Watson exists as a quarterback on the depth chart without actually being considered for the starting job. The Browns cannot let him go without incurring dead money penalties that would fundamentally damage the offensive infrastructure they're trying to construct around their actual future. Dead money is essentially wasted salary cap space. It's money that counts against the cap but isn't being used productively. It's money that could have been spent on offensive line improvement, on receiver development, on defensive reinforcement. Every dollar tied up in Watson's dead money is a dollar that can't be deployed elsewhere. It's a drag on organizational flexibility. So here's the trap. Watson is on the roster. He's collecting his paycheck. He's technically available for competition. But his own general manager is publicly refusing to give his experience any competitive standing. He's positioning a second-year player as the franchise future. He's building the entire offense around that second-year player. He's making strategic draft picks to support that second-year player. And Watson has to watch it happen while still being paid $44.9 million. This is the cruel mathematics of the NFL. Sometimes the best decision for your franchise isn't the cleanest decision. Sometimes you have to pay for mistakes while moving forward anyway. Sometimes you have to live with the consequences of previous decisions while making new ones. Cleveland is living that nightmare right now. They're paying Watson to be a backup while building around Sanders. They're investing in their future while still servicing their past. When you arrange those facts in order, Watson on the roster, Watson collecting $44.9 million, Watson's general manager refusing to defend his competitiveness, Watson watching a second-year player being positioned as the franchise future, they form a cohesive narrative. It's not a narrative of hope for Watson. It's not a narrative of an open competition. It's a narrative of an organization that made an expensive mistake and is now paying the price while moving forward anyway. The Watson experiment's financial reality has been acknowledged by the organization as the price of a choice that didn't work out. By committing to their new starting lineup, they've moved beyond the psychology of protecting that investment. They're no longer trying to justify the Watson acquisition. They're no longer trying to make it work. They're no longer protecting the $230 million and 3 first-round picks they invested in his arrival. They're accepting the loss and moving on financially while remaining locked in contractually. Whether Watson is satisfied with his repositioned role almost doesn't matter at this point. Watson's dissatisfaction with his repositioned role is understandable as a human reaction to an agonizing professional situation. If you're an elite quarterback being paid $44.9 million and your organization is publicly positioning a second-year player as the franchise future, and your general manager is refusing to defend your competitive advantages, you're going to be frustrated. You're going to be angry. You're going to wonder how you got here. That emotional response is completely justified. But whether he's satisfied or not doesn't matter anymore. That irrelevance was made official in the most polished way possible through Barry's press conference this week. Barry wasn't cruel about it. He wasn't harsh. He simply made structural choices that communicated the organizational direction without explicitly stating it. Watson will process that. He'll understand what happened. He'll live with the consequences. The organization will live with the financial consequences for years, potentially through the duration of Watson's contract. This is the complete picture. The organization has decided to move forward with Shedeur Sanders. They've publicly signaled that through careful language choices. They're building the offense around him. They're investing in his development. They're committing to his future. And they're paying Deshaun Watson $44.9 million to be a backup while they do it. That's the organizational direction. That's the commitment that was communicated without being explicitly stated. But there's one more comparison that makes this crystal clear. There's a third component that completes this picture, and it's worth examining closely because of the structural contrast it creates. Look at what Barry said about Dorian Green, because this comparison reveals the organizational hierarchy with absolute clarity. Understanding how Barry discussed Green versus how he discussed Sanders versus how he discussed Watson gives you the complete organizational blueprint. This is where the architecture becomes undeniable. Green's developmental plan could be summarized in 3 words: run, walk, crawl. Or actually, if you want to get the order right in Barry's phrasing, it's crawl, walk, run, measured, patient, cautious language. This isn't forward-looking language. This isn't investment language. This is developmental language reserved for players who are genuinely years away from meaningful contribution. This is the terminology an executive uses to describe a player whose timeline is genuinely long, whose contribution to actual winning this season is essentially zero from a starting quarterback perspective, and whose role in the current competitive season is fundamentally developmental. The crawl, walk, run framework is standard in NFL player development. It represents incremental progress. You start at the most basic level, crawl, where the player is learning fundamentals. You progress to walk, where the player is implementing those fundamentals in controlled situations. And eventually, you reach run, where the player is deployed in actual game situations at competitive speed. It's a systematic approach to development that acknowledges the player isn't ready now, but through proper progression, might contribute eventually. For Green, that's the right approach. It's responsible and appropriate for a 6th-round quarterback who needs significant time and careful development before making any meaningful contribution at the professional level. You can't throw a 6th-round pick into the fire. You can't expect immediate results. You have to develop him systematically. You have to be patient. You have to allow progression. Barry's language reflected that appropriate organizational approach to a developmental player. But here's what matters. Here's where the comparison becomes absolutely critical to understanding organizational direction. The structural difference between command of the offense language and crawl, walk, run language is massive. It's not a subtlety that requires deep interpretation. It's not something you need to read between the lines to find. It's enormous and obvious to anyone fluent in front office communication. These aren't comparable statements about comparable situations. Command is forward-looking, investment-level language. It's the language you use for a player you're building around. It's the language that indicates system construction. It's the language of commitment. Crawl, walk, run is timeline-based language. It's the language you use for a player who's developing on the organization's schedule. It's the language of patience and incremental progress. The 2 phrases communicate opposite organizational intentions. Anyone trying to construct a narrative about a genuine 3-way quarterback competition based on what actually came out of that press conference would have to be deliberately ignoring what Barry communicated. He acknowledged Green's potential growth, exactly what developing players should receive. He reserved franchise quarterback language for Shedeur. He positioned Watson as a veteran without competitive advantage. He placed Green on a long developmental timeline. These aren't the statements of someone running an open competition. These are the statements of someone communicating organizational hierarchy clearly to people who understand the language. Treating those conversations as equivalent would be a fundamental misreading of how front office executives actually communicate. Those are categorically different conversations about categorically different situations. Green is a developmental player. Watson is a veteran without competitive standing. Sanders is the franchise future. These are 3 different organizational roles, and Barry communicated all 3 with surgical precision. The comparison also reveals something about roster construction that matters for understanding organizational confidence. If Cleveland was genuinely uncertain about Sanders, they would invest more heavily in developmental quarterbacks. They would build depth in case things don't work out. They would create contingency plans. Instead, they have 3 quarterbacks, one they're investing in heavily, one they're paying to be a backup, and one they're developing on a long timeline. That's the roster construction of an organization that's made its decision. You don't allocate resources this way if you're uncertain. You construct your quarterback room this way when you've decided on your direction and you're building the supporting structure accordingly. The developmental timeline for Green, the dismissal of Watson's competitive standing, and the investment in Sanders' development, all 3 of these communicate the same organizational intention. It's also worth noting that Berry didn't use conflicting language. He didn't say Sanders and Green were in similar developmental tracks. He didn't suggest Watson and Sanders were on equal footing. He differentiated clearly through language structure. That's not accidental. That's intentional. Every choice reinforces the organizational direction. Every contrast clarifies the hierarchy. Every comparison reveals the decision that's been made. The organizational communication strategy emerges clearly when you see all 3 quarterbacks discussed together. Sanders gets investment language. Watson gets deflated language. Green gets developmental language. There's no confusion. There's no ambiguity. There's just different players in different roles being communicated about with language that clarifies their position in the organizational hierarchy. That's masterful executive communication. That's what separates elite general managers from average ones. The ability to communicate clearly to people who understand while maintaining the appearance of open process for people who don't. Berry's press conference didn't happen in isolation. It's crucial to recognize the larger context of what Cleveland has constructed around this decision, because that context confirms everything the language suggested. When you examine the organizational decisions made this offseason, you discover that every choice points toward the same conclusion. Every draft pick, every free agent signing, every coaching decision, every training camp allocation, they all reinforce the same narrative. They all support the same direction. They all validate the decision that Berry communicated through his careful language choices. Spencer Fano represents the foundational piece of this organizational puzzle. A first-round offensive tackle, selected 9th overall. Think about what that decision communicates. You don't spend a top 10 pick on offensive line protection for a player you're still genuinely assessing in a competition. You don't make that kind of significant investment for someone whose future is uncertain. Top 10 picks are reserved for players an organization has decided are central to their future. You pick offensive line to protect your franchise quarterback. You pick receivers to create weapons for your franchise quarterback. You pick defensive players to create a supporting cast for your franchise quarterback. When Cleveland selected Fano 9th overall, they were making a statement. They were saying, "We have a young quarterback we're committed to protecting. We're not protecting a veteran. We're not protecting someone we're still evaluating. We're protecting someone we've decided is our future." That draft pick, more than any press conference language, communicates organizational commitment. You can't afford to be wrong on a 9th overall pick. You need that player to be a cornerstone piece for years. That means the quarterback he's protecting needs to be the franchise quarterback. The receiver room construction reinforces this narrative. Denzel Washington and Casey Conception weren't random free agent signings. These weapons weren't chosen for their ability to work with any quarterback. They were chosen to enhance a particular type of passer's timing-based accuracy and processing style. These are receivers who demand precision. They demand a quarterback who understands their routes at a cognitive level. They're receivers who work best with a quarterback who has command of the offense, not just someone running plays, but someone orchestrating them. This is organizational intentionality. You don't acquire specific receiver types by accident. You do it when you're building an offense around a particular quarterback skill set. You're saying, we know what kind of quarterback we have. We know how he processes. We know his strengths. We're building weapons that maximize those strengths. That's not the approach of an organization still evaluating its quarterback situation. The defense represents organizational stability. Cleveland's defense didn't significantly deteriorate after finishing in the top 5 of the league last season. No desperation moves. No last-minute scrambles to fix massive weaknesses. A stable defensive foundation. This matters because it communicates confidence in the offensive direction. If you're uncertain about your quarterback situation, you might invest heavily in defensive reinforcement as insurance. You might hedge your bets. Instead, Cleveland seems comfortable with their defensive stability because they're confident in the offense. Todd Monken, the head coach, deserves specific attention in this context. Monken has no emotional stake in using starting lineup decisions to justify the Watson acquisition because he wasn't involved in that trade. He wasn't the coach who brought Watson in. He wasn't the one who championed that decision. He can evaluate objectively without defending past organizational decisions. That's actually valuable for clarity. Monken can say what makes sense for this team moving forward, not what makes sense for justifying past investments. When you combine all these pieces, the language from the press conference, the 9th overall pick for offensive line protection, the specific receiver acquisitions, the stable defense, the new coaching perspective, you don't get a picture of organizational uncertainty. You get a picture of an organization that's made a decision and is constructing around that decision systematically. Every component of this picture was constructed with the same architectural intention. Every choice leads to the same outcome. This appears to be an analytical footnote, but it matters enormously when you understand professional football vocabulary and organizational construction philosophy. The press conference language, the draft decisions, the free agent signings, the coaching staff composition, they all tell the same story. They all point toward the same conclusion. What's particularly impressive about this orchestration is how comprehensive it is. Cleveland didn't just position Shedeur through language. They didn't just draft an offensive tackle. They didn't just sign specific receivers. They didn't just maintain defensive stability. They did all of it together. They created a complete organizational ecosystem that supports the quarterback decision. That's not something you do for a player you're still evaluating. That's what you do for a player you've decided is your future. The financial commitment matters too. Between draft capital, salary cap, and coaching resources, Cleveland has invested significantly in this direction. That level of organizational resource commitment doesn't happen without genuine conviction. You can't afford to be wrong at that scale. You need to be confident in your direction. This is what separates professional organizations from chaotic ones. It's not about making bold statements or generating headlines. It's about systematic decision-making that moves an entire organization in one direction. It's about language that communicates that direction. It's about draft capital deployed in support of that direction. It's about player acquisitions that reinforce that direction. It's about coaching perspectives that align with that direction. When all those pieces align, the organization moves with purpose. The complete picture that emerges from Berry's press conference isn't actually that complex. Once you understand the language architecture, once you see the draft capital, once you understand the offensive construction, once you recognize the stability elsewhere, the organizational direction becomes unmistakable. Cleveland has decided to build around Shedeur Sanders. They've communicated it through sophisticated language. They've supported it through systematic organizational decisions. They've invested capital in executing it. What remains is just the formality of the official announcement. But the decision has already been made. Before we move forward, it's essential to understand the full significance of Berry's word choice in referring to Shedeur's anticipated command of the offense. This isn't casual language. This isn't exploratory language. This is the most potent term in professional quarterback evaluation. When an NFL general manager refers to a second-year quarterback's relationship with an offense as command, he's not being casual or investigative. He's using terminology that carries enormous weight in professional circles. He's communicating something very specific to people who understand the language. Command is different from management. It's different from understanding. It's different from running. Command indicates ownership. Command indicates authority. Command indicates the player is the decision maker, and the system functions through his understanding and execution. When you have command of something, you don't need to think about the instructions. You've internalized the system so deeply that you operate with autonomy. You don't need external direction because your understanding is complete. Think about what that distinction means for a quarterback. A quarterback who manages an offense, executes, plays the way they're designed. A quarterback with command of an offense understands the principles so thoroughly that he can adjust within structure. He can call audibles with conviction. He can orchestrate tempo. He can manage the game. He can dictate to the defense through pre-snap communication. That's the difference between a quarterback executing a system and a quarterback running a system. That's enormous. In the context of an NFL organization, command language is reserved for quarterbacks in whom the organization has genuinely invested. It's the language you use for players whose development you're financing because their identity within the organization has already been decided in the rooms where those decisions actually happen. You don't use command for a player you're still evaluating. You don't use it for a player in a genuine competition. You use it for the quarterback you've already committed to. The one whose growth trajectory justifies organizational investment. The one whose failure would reflect organizational failure because you've already committed so much to their success. This is why the word choice matters so much. Command isn't just descriptive language, it's commitment language. When an executive uses command in reference to a quarterback, he's signaling to every person in the organization that this is the quarterback they're building around. This is the quarterback they're investing in. This is the quarterback whose success is organizational success. This is the quarterback who gets the resources, the reps, the support, and the infrastructure necessary to succeed. Contrast that with how other quarterbacks are discussed. Prospect language suggests a player is being evaluated. Competitive language suggests a player is among several options. Developmental language suggests organizational patience around a long timeline. But command language suggests the decision has been made and the system is being built around that player. It's not subtle. It's not something you need to decode. It's just a different category of communication entirely. The brilliance of Barry's word choice is that he managed to communicate this commitment without technically making any statement that could be quoted controversially. "We anticipate him having more command" isn't a headline that says, "We're benching Watson." It's not a statement that violates the competition narrative. It's not a controversial quote. But to every person fluent in professional football language, it's absolutely clear what he communicated. This is why understanding front office language matters so much for fans trying to interpret what's actually happening in organizations. Journalists pick up on these things, that's why certain stories break when they do. But the general fan audience often misses the architecture. They focus on the surface language. They think a press conference about an open competition is actually about an open competition. They don't recognize that command and competition aren't compatible concepts in professional football language. When Barry used command, he was essentially informing the entire Browns organization of the direction that's been decided. Every coach understood. Every scout understood. Every member of the front office understood. Everyone in the building knew what that word communicated. Watson understood. Shedeur understood. The media understood, even if they didn't explicitly say so. The word transcended the surface communication and reached everyone who needed to hear the real message. The practical implications of this language are enormous. Coaches now know how to allocate reps. They know which quarterback gets the first team repetitions in training camp. They know which quarterback the game plans are built around. They know which quarterback's comfort level is the priority. Training staff knows who to invest development resources in. Scouts know what they're evaluating for in the future. The entire organization now has clarity about direction, even though technically nothing definitive was stated. This is what separates elite executives from good ones. It's not about making dramatic declarations. It's about precision in communication that serves organizational objectives while maintaining professional dignity for all involved. It's about understanding that how you say something matters as much as what you say. It's about recognizing that the real decisions happen in film rooms and strategy sessions, and the press conference is simply the moment when those decisions become visible to those paying attention. Barry demonstrated this level of mastery. He communicated his decision through language that was simultaneously clear to insiders and deniable to outsiders. He positioned Shedeur for success without technically excluding Watson from competition. He managed the organizational narrative while establishing clear direction. That's executive-level communication. That's what allows organizations to function with efficiency and clarity without creating unnecessary public drama. When the official announcement comes, and it will come soon, it won't be surprising to anyone who understood the architecture of Barry's language. It won't be unexpected. It will be confirmation of what was already communicated. The real decision-making happened in advance. The real commitment was made previously. The press conference was just the moment when that decision became visible to those paying attention. And the word command was the architectural choice that made it undeniable. This organizational shift represents something bigger than one quarterback competition. It's evidence of an organization finally moving past the psychological weight of a massive failed investment. It's an organization choosing its future over defending its past. And it happened not through dramatic declarations, but through the precise architectural choices of someone who understands that true power in professional football communication lies not in what you say loudly, but in what you signal clearly to those listening carefully. When the official announcement comes, and it will come soon, you'll recognize it as confirmation of what was already communicated. You'll understand that the real decision-making happens in rooms away from the cameras, but the architects of those decisions speak in a language that's always available to anyone willing to listen properly. The depth chart will be updated. The press conference statement will be made. The media will report the news. But those of us who understood the language already knew what was coming. The Cleveland Browns are moving forward with Shedeur Sanders as their franchise quarterback. They're paying Deshaun Watson to be their backup. They're developing Dorian Green on a long timeline. They've invested in the infrastructure to support Sanders' success. They've organized the entire team around this direction. And Andrew Berry communicated all of it without technically saying any of it explicitly. That's the architecture of professional football decision-making. That's how elite organizations function. And now you understand how to recognize it.